Sofia gripped the steering wheel, her knuckles white. The road stretched before her, swallowed by an unnatural fog. It was a thick, pearly expanse, swallowing the world beyond her headlights. This was Silent Hollow, a town forgotten by time and shrouded in an eternal mist. She parked at the edge of town, the silence deafening. Buildings loomed, spectral silhouettes against the fog. They were weathered and ancient, their windows like vacant eyes. A chill snaked down her spine. This place held its breath. It waited. Sofia grabbed her camera, its weight a comfort in the unsettling stillness. She was a photographer drawn to the unusual, the forgotten. Silent Hollow, with its ghostly pallor, was a story begging to be unveiled. Little did she know, it was a story that would consume her. As she stepped into the fog, it was like stepping into another world. The air grew heavy, thick with a strange, almost sweet scent. It sent a shiver down her spine, but she pressed on, her camera clicking, capturing the ethereal beauty of this forgotten place. The townsfolk moved like wraiths, their faces obscured by the fog. They were eerily silent, their eyes vacant and distant. Sofia tried to speak, to ask about the fog, but they only stared, their silence a chilling response. She found an old woman sitting on a porch swing, her wrinkled face barely visible through the swirling mist. "The fog," Sofia began, her voice a nervous tremor in the stillness. "It never lifts." The woman turned slowly, her eyes like two black marbles in the gloom. Her voice, when she spoke, was a dry rasp, barely audible. "The fog sings at night," she whispered, her gaze fixed on Sofia. "It calls to us. It calls to everyone." And then she fell silent again, her gaze drifting back into the fog, leaving Sofia with a growing sense of unease. The fog sang? What could it mean? Nightfall brought a deeper chill. The fog thickened, swirling around Sofia's legs like restless spirits. It was then she heard it, a low, mournful sound that seemed to emanate from the fog itself. It was a haunting melody, filled with a deep, unsettling sorrow. The sound drew her deeper into the town, past the vacant buildings and empty streets. The fog seemed to press in on her, suffocating, disorienting. She stumbled, her hand gripping her camera for support. It was the only familiar thing in this spectral world. As the song reached its crescendo, figures began to emerge from the fog. They moved slowly, rhythmically, their forms shifting and blurring in the mist. They were tall and skeletal, their limbs elongated and grotesque. Fear, cold and sharp, pierced through Sofia's growing unease. Sofia raised her camera, her finger trembling on the shutter button. The flash cut through the fog, illuminating the figures for a fleeting moment. Their faces were pale and gaunt, their eyes hollow sockets. They moved with a stiff, unnatural grace, like puppets on invisible strings. She snapped picture after picture, documenting the horrifying scene. Each flash revealed more of the macabre procession. Men and women, their faces locked in expressions of silent agony, moved through the fog like spectral dancers. Their clothes were old, tattered remnants of a bygone era. One figure, a young woman with long, flowing hair, turned towards Sofia. Her eyes met the camera lens, and for a fleeting moment, Sofia saw a flicker of recognition, a plea for help in those empty orbs. It was a look that would haunt her dreams long after she left this place, if she ever left. Driven by a morbid curiosity, Sofia followed the spectral procession. They led her to the town square, where a towering oak tree stood, its branches lost in the swirling fog above. Beneath the tree, a group of figures stood around a large, flat stone, their voices a low, guttural chant that echoed through the square. As Sofia crept closer, she saw what lay upon the stone. It was a body, shrouded in a white cloth. The figures surrounding it were chanting, their voices rising and falling in a hypnotic rhythm. They were feeding the fog, offering a soul to appease its hunger. Sofia's stomach churned. This was the town's terrible secret, a pact with a malevolent force. The fog wasn't a natural phenomenon. It was a being, sustained by sacrifice. And the townspeople, trapped in their silent world, were both its wardens and its prisoners. The chanting reached a fever pitch, and the figures surrounding the altar threw back their hoods. Their faces, illuminated by the flickering light of torches, were not the faces of monsters. They were the faces of ordinary people, their features etched with a mixture of fear and grim determination. Sofia watched in horror as they lifted their arms in unison, their voices echoing through the square. A blinding light erupted from the stone altar, momentarily dispelling the fog. Sofia shielded her eyes, and when she dared to look again, the body was gone, vanished into the swirling mist. The townspeople, their faces now slack with relief, began to disperse, melting back into the fog like shadows swallowed by the night. The ritual was complete. The fog had been fed, and Sofia, hidden in the shadows, had witnessed its terrible hunger firsthand. Panic seized Sofia. She had to escape, to outrun the fog and its chilling song. Turning, she ran blindly, her camera bouncing against her chest. The fog clung to her, a suffocating presence that seemed to sap her strength, but the fog was relentless. It coiled around her ankles, tugged at her clothes, slowed her progress. The sounds of the town, the ghostly whispers and the distant, mournful song seemed to be closing in on her. Her breath caught in her throat, her lungs burning. She could hear the townspeople now, their footsteps soft but insistent in the stillness. They were coming for her. She knew it. They couldn't let her leave, not after she had witnessed their dark secret. The fog wouldn't allow it. Sofia stumbled, falling to her knees. The fog swirled around her, a cold, suffocating embrace. She looked back, her heart pounding against her ribs. The figures were closer now, their forms indistinct in the mist, their eyes glowing with an eerie light. They reached her, their cold, clammy hands closing around her arms. She struggled, but it was no use. Their grip was strong, unyielding. They were pulling her towards the town square, back to the heart of the fog. As they dragged her through the swirling mist, Sofia raised her camera one last time. She pointed it at her captors, her finger pressing down on the shutter release. The flash illuminated their faces, a grotesque tableau of fear and fanaticism. It was the last thing she ever saw. The next morning, the fog still clung to Silent Hollow, thick and silent as a shroud. The town remained unchanged, its inhabitants going about their daily routines with vacant eyes and ghostly steps. Sofia was gone, vanished without a trace. The only evidence of her presence was her camera, lying abandoned in the town square. The film inside, when developed, revealed a series of chilling images. Photos of the fog, the ghostly figures, the ritual, and finally, a horrifying self-portrait. In the final photo, Sofia stood surrounded by the townspeople, their faces obscured by the fog. But her face, contorted in a silent scream, was clearly visible. Her eyes, wide with terror, stared out from the photograph, a haunting reminder of the fog's insatiable hunger. And as a new day dawned, a lone car arrived at the edge of town, its driver drawn by the lure of the unknown. The fog, swirling gently, seemed to beckon him forward, welcoming another soul into its silent embrace.